Welcome to today's show, Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess, passionate, inspirational speaker, author, poet, and entrepreneur. Good morning, and welcome to Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm delighted that you joined me this morning. Today is Wednesday, August 22nd. I want to give a big thank you to those of you who are listening today all around the world. I'm delighted and so grateful that you tuned in. I sure hope you're enjoying a fabulous day today and that you're having a fantastic week, because in the grand song of the universe, you know what? Life is so precious and it's so short, compared to everything else, right? It's short and sweet, but very, very precious. So I hope you're making a difference in your own life, because when you do, you also make a difference in someone else's life. Now, a lot of folks want to make their life count for something, and they ask me, Dr. Gloria, how do you do that? Well, it's simple. It's very, very simple. You make your life count day by day, step by step, moment by moment, every single day, 365, 24/7. That's what Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count is all about. You can learn more about Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count by visiting the Gloria Burgess website. That's right, the Gloria Burgess website. That's Gloria, B as in boy, URGESS.com. That's the Gloria Burgess website, Gloria, B as in boy, URGESS.com, or by visiting Facebook. And that's facebook.com/DR for Doctor, DRGLORIABURGESS /. I look forward to seeing you in one of those places. Now today, I want to talk with you about faithfulness. Specifically, we're going to focus on faithfulness as it relates to being steady, okay? The notion of being steadfast. Because when you're faithful, you actually reap the rewards of staying the course, of holding on and going on and pressing on. Now, today I'm going to share in a way that I often share a message outside of this podcast, but not very often right here. You see, people often come up to me after hearing me speak or teach, and they ask me if I'm a pastor. Now, I tell them, yes. I think of all aspects of my work and my life as a ministry, although I'm not a formally trained pastor or minister, but I actually equip people, all kinds of people, and as part of the work I do as a professor, I actually equip and train pastors and others who have ministerial roles. And every now and then, a pastor of a church will invite me to deliver the sermon or the message in their church, which is something I truly, truly treasure and enjoy. So today's podcast is one of those special occasions where I'm going to share a message I delivered not too long ago at one of our local churches. My message is all about faithfulness. And as I said earlier, I'm really talking about being steady, being steadfast, because you know what? When we are faithful in this way, when you are faithful, you make a difference in your own life, and you also make a difference in the lives of others. So, it's time to get your earbuds in and lace up your walking shoes and listen up, right? And if you're not going to walk right now, maybe it's time for you to just put your feet up, sit in your favorite chair, get yourself a cup of coffee or tea or a long, cool glass of water. We're going to have a great time. Now, before I jump into today's show, I just want to take a moment to welcome you. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Dr. Gloria, and this is Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'd like to extend a very special welcome to those of you who are joining my show, or if you're joining Talk Network Radio for the very first time. Let me tell you, you are in for a real treat. I'm so excited to have you listening in today, and I'm deeply honored that you've allowed me to be part of your day, so you can be inspired by the ideas and resources to make your life count. Today's program is all about faithfulness. I want to thank Pastor Karen for inviting me to share my message with you this morning. Today, I'm honored and blessed to talk with you about faithfulness. I'm going to share a little bit of my story with you so you know who's talking to you. And I also want you to hear how my story, my own story, is connected with faithfulness. Faithfulness to my calling and my ministry particularly in transformational leadership. Now, as I share with you, I invite you to reflect on a couple of questions. The first question I want you to ask yourself is, what is the rhythm? What is the rhythm of faithfulness in my own life? The second question is this: how might I become more faithful in my walk with my family, friends, and even total strangers? Again, that second question is, how might I become more faithful in my walk with my friends, my family, and even total strangers? Now, I recently finished writing a chapter for a book. And since this chapter is still on my heart and on my mind, I thought I'd share a bit about it today. But first, let me give you a little bit more context. Last year, I submitted a paper for the Faulkner Conference in Oxford, Mississippi. Now, this is a 46-year-old conference. Now, the purpose of the conference is to lift up literary scholarship focused on William Faulkner's work. And for those of you listening in different parts of the world, I know that not everybody knows who William Faulkner is. So let me just say briefly, William Faulkner is probably the most celebrated American author of the 20th century. So this conference is all about lifting up his novels, his short stories, his screenplays, and other writings. The director and curator of the conference is Dr. J. Watson. Jay was absolutely thrilled when he read my paper. And he invited me to present it with the following provision. He said, Dr. Burgess, please do not turn this into an academic paper. Now, you'll learn why in just a few moments. So when Jay introduced me at the conference, he said that my paper was the most distinctive abstract he had read for that year's conference. Now, what I submitted is the story that I will share with you a bit later. I was surprised and honored that Dr. Watson introduced me in this way. I mean, how cool is that to have the best abstract of any that he had read for that year's conference? That's pretty significant and pretty cool. You see, I was born right there where I was presenting in Oxford, Mississippi. Now, how many of you have ever been to Mississippi or anywhere else in the Deep South? So, you know, if I say Mississippi is a place that's good to be from, you'll know what I'm talking about, right? Now, that was a long time ago. When I was a little girl, living in Oxford, I actually thought I lived in an all-black town. I didn't know the meaning of segregation. So every Saturday, when my family went to what I thought was the all-white town, we were actually going uptown to downtown Oxford. Although I didn't know the meaning of the word segregation, I certainly felt its impact. I knew it by the feeling I had in my stomach, right? I mean, when my parents and my sisters and I had to go through the back door of the shops on the town square, when my parents politely called the white shopkeepers Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, right? But the shopkeepers called my parents by their first names. Now, as a little kid, you don't know what's really going on, but you get that really odd, just uncomfortable feeling in your stomach. And I remember putting my little hands on my little hips and waving my little finger, because even as a youngster, I knew that someday, I wanted to make it impossible for anyone to treat my parents, my sisters, me, or anyone else differently because of the color of our skin. Now, little did I know that God was already constructing the scaffold of my legacy. So, when I began my presentation, as I always do, I started with gratitude. I thanked all the folks who had come to the conference, with a special thanks to all the folks who had come to Oxford just to hear me. There was one whole row filled with my aunts, my uncles, cousins, and family friends who lived in and around Oxford. Another whole row was filled with family members who either flew or drove to Oxford for one night only. They came from New York, Massachusetts, California, Georgia, and Michigan. And most of these folks would be back on a plane or on the road at dawn 30 the next morning. Now, these people included my mom, Mildred Blackman McEwen, who, at that time, was 87 years old. So I thanked my family, my extended family, and my family friends for showing up, for representing. You see, all of these people, all of these folks are part of my community. They are the mud and straw of my personal village. You know something? I would not be here with you today without their broad shoulders, their broad, stout, fierce shoulders to stand on. I also thank Dr. Watson for honoring me and my family, for inviting and hosting me to share my story with his esteemed colleagues from around the country and throughout the world. Now, you might be wondering, why so much gratitude? Well, that's who I am. If you listen to this podcast regularly, you know that, right? So I was simply being faithful to who I am and to whose I am. I was also keenly aware that this was an important and historic occasion for the McEwen and Blackman families, for our extended family. It was also an important historic occasion for the Faulkner Conference and for Dr. Watson. Now, as the curator of this 40-plus-year-old conference, Jay also wore another hat. He played another role, and it's a role that we all play, whether we're conscious of it or not, and that's the role of gatekeeper. I thanked Jay for being a gracious gatekeeper, because in Oxford and at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, that gate has not always swung both ways, and certainly not for African Americans. That was true when I was a little girl growing up in the segregated South, and unfortunately, you know what, it's still true. Not only in Oxford, it's true in many places throughout the world, and right here in our own country, and in this city that we call home. Now, when I thanked Jay for being gracious, I was also thanking him for his faithfulness.